stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good morning, everyone. This meeting for Friday, which was scheduled at 10 o'clock, is now, for the record, at 10:48. Has been called pursuant to Chapter 160 of the County Commissioners Policies and Procedures Section 160-2A6, which includes the following as one of the duties of the President: to call special meetings of the Board when deemed necessary. In addition, the President shall also call a special meeting at the request of any 3 commissioners. The purpose of today's meeting, which was introduced on Wednesday, was the proposed contract between Butterfield Life and the Cecil County government relating to animal control services. Copies were made available on Wednesday, and a copy of the contract was also posted on the county website. So today the board will discuss the changes that were proposed on Wednesday. We'll have a discussion, consider any additional changes to the contract, and then vote on the contract this morning. With that, Mr. Wine, as County Administrator, do you have anything you'd like to share at this time or anything further?
Mr. President, members of the board, there has been one change that I would call clarification, and that's in paragraph 4, duties of the ACCA. I'll just read the change. Starts in the second line, dealing with calls or complaints. In the event of a call or complaint, the provider shall respond as promptly as possible, no later than the next business day. Also, in the event of an emergency, as defined below, the provider shall respond no later than 2 hours after receipt of said emergency call or complaint. And then the emergency definition stays the same. There was discussion relative to differentiating between a response time for a regular call, a non-emergency call, and an emergency.
Okay, very good. I know that was discussed on Wednesday's meeting. Commissioner, I know you weren't here because of courtesy. Any comments on that change? The other 4 commissioners we had discussed that.
No.
Any comments on that change there? Commissioner Hodge, are you satisfied with that change?
Not really. I'm not sure that it spells out sufficiently, and if I was a complainant or a caller the next day, in my opinion, is not necessarily satisfactory. If there's a dog at large, you go back the next day, I seriously doubt that it'll be on that property. And I think that should have been a little bit spelled out better. I would have preferred within 2 to 4 hours. I don't think that's a very objective standard.
Well, I think it's more restrictive than as promptly as possible, so it is more restrictive than it was before.
There's a whole lot of room for discretion on what does that mean exactly? That means 2 hours, 3 hours, 20 minutes, 2 days. I know it's limited to the next business day, but I just don't think that's sufficient.
Okay. Well, again, as our discussion on Wednesday, we asked for any suggestions with regard to that, and I didn't see any forthcoming.
Well, the one suggestion I made was just take emergency out of the response time. Just say that all calls and complaints will be responded to within 2 hours.
I don't think that's very realistic, and we certainly didn't put that in the previous contract.
No, it wasn't part of the original one as well. And I think there should be a difference between emergency call and standard call. Okay. Are there any other questions with regard to the contract or anything that you need to bring to our attention at this time? Any additional changes?
I guess, Norman can help with this, but it's just like there is a provision of the contract which requires, which essentially says that we can't execute the contract unless there's a executed lease for the shelter facility. We do have and Norman has reviewed it, a lease, with Rainwood Kennels, for the term ending August 1st, 2013. And they also have an addendum to their original lease, where they ran into the zoning variance issue for another building on that property to effectively start at around August 1st.
Okay. Very good.
Do those leases for those shelters meet the county's requirements?
Were they inspected?
The Rainwood kennels have been inspected and did meet the county requirements. Yes.
And there's enough kennels to the job to store, house in town the number of animals that we're normally been accustomed to?
Well, I'm not sure, having not been in town and business, I don't know, Commissioner Hodge, but I would imagine they think it's adequate.
Don't want to put you on the spot, Richard, but you did inspect it. Can you just add to that?
Sure. There was a party of the interim group that went over to inspect the shelter. The shelter is a licensed kennel in Cecil County. It is, quite frankly, it's a beautiful facility. We found it to be very clean, very professional, and with ample room, given the arrangements the current owner is going to make for segregation of the animals.
Okay, very good.
Well, I would say there's no doubt in my mind that the quality of the kennels is probably sufficient and meets the requirements. But what about the quality? Excuse me, the quantity. Is it sufficient to perform the animal control services that we need for all of Cecil County?
It would appear yes.
Okay. Any other additional questions on anything here? We did get the Commissioner Moore's amendment written in with regard to segregation of funds with regard to nonprofit versus the actual animal control funds. I think that was instituted. Okay. Anything else?
I did send an email to all the commissioners with some performance standards that I have found that other municipalities have required. And again, we talked about this so that we have objective standards to evaluate the performance of the provider. We have not modified the contract to include any performance standards.
On Wednesday, Mr. Warren, you did touch on some of those that were listed here as I X them off. Was there anything else that stood out either through the ordinance or the contract itself that stood out as something that we had neglected?
No, I think the contents are suitable to meet the January 1st effective date.
Okay, very good. Anybody have any questions on those comments for those items? Okay. One of the other items that we had talked about was with regard to the length of term. We had gone back and forth with regard to, I believe it was 18 months, and then a renewal with regard to a renewal period of 1 year, and then after that, another renewal period of another year. Does anyone have any comments on with regard to the length of the term?
The recommendation from the committee that vetted the contract or vetted the response to the RFP, the recommendation was an 18-month contract with 2 one-year extensions pending approval of both sides. That was agreed to by the Buddy for Life, and I think that's a very appropriate, it's longer than a year. It's 18 months, so it gives them additional time for the startup and all the things that will happen with the startup, and I accept the recommendation.
Does anyone have any comments on the length of the term at all? Anyone? Okay, well, I know that we had discussed before with regard to the length of the term, since we were starting with a clean slate, to give the organization an opportunity to get their legs up underneath of them, to become established, and to begin their outreach program as the animal care control provider in the county. And with regard in the, not only the contract, but the chapter 209, that there are various audits and benchmarks written in that. I was considering, and I'll just reiterate it just for discussion purposes only at this time, was considering a 3-year contract, so I just throw that out on the floor for discussion.
I believe a 3-year contract is excessive. I would never hire an employee, especially an employee that did not have a track record of performance, and say you have 3 years to do basically whatever you want to, as long as you don't, as long as it's within the confines of the contract. I don't think that's appropriate. I think an 18-month benchmark is extremely appropriate, and the opportunity to extend that to the benefit of all of Cecil County.
Once again, the 1-year option renewal, that really comes down to a decision on whether or not they've met the contract terms, but whether or not county executive is happy with their performance, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Well, I understand President Mullen had brought this up before, and I do agree. I'm pleased that we have competition, and to enable the competition to get their legs, to have enough time to get footing, to establish themselves. I think it's reasonable to give them 3 years to do so. However, if you do not meet the terms of the contract, there is reason to cancel the contract, and that's enough, in my opinion, remedy to intervene.
I would disagree with that, Commissioner Brumel. There is no competition. The other entity that submitted a response withdrew that response, so there effectively is no competition.
Well, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but we just came from an emergency hearing to where.
I'm very aware of that.
Yes, and I am sure you are. And I would encourage them to apply for the next RFP, and having 2 entities competing. And I received an email from another organization that wanted to get into the process late. The more competition we have, the more quality of service I think we can choose from.
I would absolutely agree with that, but in this particular case, you are saying that we're going to give this to an entity for 3 years with no competition. And at the point in time, and again, there was no, or very little competition, because the other respondent withdrew the response. So there was no competition.
It seemed to me, and it might just be my perception, but what we ran into before is, if we didn't go with the SPCA, who were we going to go with? Now this entity, Buddy for Life, knows that the SPCA is more than happy to step in behind them. They're going to be very motivated to keep the terms of the contract. And this is a bigger contract. This is more responsibility. And there's a lot of unknowns in this.
I agree, and that's why a 3-year period is very inappropriate.
I think for that reason, we should give them the time to get up and running and establish themselves.
And I think 18 months is a sufficient period of time to do that.
I disagree.
President Mullen, this is Robert Hodge, and I agree with Commissioner Moore that it's inappropriate and irresponsible for us to modify this contract
It's a new organization. You have setup time, opportunity to engage the community. Okay, it's a brand new business. You're a business person, right? You preach that out of your Bible in terms of business. Everybody deserves an opportunity, right?
Right, and 18 months should be sufficient.
Okay, but to your point the other day, 18 months is going to be a startup period, and they're going to start right from ground zero at scratch. And where I'm coming from is an idea to get the infrastructure in place, to start to engage the community with outreach and all the other issues that this organization is going to start from scratch, and to move forward. That's why I'm looking at a little bit of a longer opportunity, and that's why I broached the issue.
Commissioner Mullen, I understand where you're coming from, but the reality is, we're not starting with a clean slate, we're starting with no slate. Personally, I am thrilled that Buddy for Life has responded. I want this to work. There's no doubt, and I think that the vetting committee that worked on this contract with a desire to make it work, and they have submitted a contract with recommendations to us for what they think will work after due consideration. And I accept their recommendation for that, not only because the recommendation came from them, because they believe after dealing with it and dealing with the problems with our current, with having to deal with not only the history of our problems before, but also with dealing with an interim animal control plan. I think that's significant, and I think that their expertise in understanding what might be needed should be accepted by the Board of Commissioners.
Well, we had this discussion the other day. I voiced my concerns at that time, and as I said in that meeting, a 3-year term would be acceptable to me. If someone was willing to make a motion, I would support that term. Or I'd like to make a motion, actually. There you go.
We have a motion on the floor for a 3-year term of the contract. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, is there any discussion on that?
Well, clearly I will be voting against this. I think 3 years is excessive. I'm also very concerned about the fact that there are 3 commissioners that have pushed this through without the proper scrutiny and without the proper due diligence, and I will not be able to vote for this.
That's fine. With regard to that, we've spent almost, it'll be 4 years this January on this issue. We've been back and forth. We've held enormous and intense public hearings. We ourselves have sat upstairs in the help room over that period, poring over the ordinance, which finally got us today to where we're at. And we have really worked hard on this, and it's just a matter of time to just bring some closure and move forward and start with a clean slate. And that's my opinion on that.
And I would have to say that scrutiny is the last thing that we haven't put enough into this contract and to this ordinance. An enormous amount of scrutiny has went into this. The ordinance, let me remind you, includes the oversight of how the money is being spent. And there was a lot of kickback on that, saying that wasn't the proper place for it. I truly believe it is, because it's important that we always include that, not from contract to contract, but the ordinance mandates that it has to be included. So, and then with your provision, that's extra scrutiny. We support that. A lot more responsibility for this provider, and this is the culmination of I think it's 2 years worth, 2 years plus worth of input from the Animal Control Oversight Board, the community. This is, I think, very monumental today that we've come a long way.
I agree. I think this is a new day for Cecil County, and I think it represents a clean break from the past. And as Commissioner Mullen said, I hope that the council and charter government have a clean slate moving forward on this issue. If I don't have an opportunity, I'd like to thank the committee for their work on this subject. I'd like to thank the rescue groups which assisted in the interim, and I know there's a great many citizens interested in this issue, and I encourage them to remain vigilant in the future. Very good. Thank you.
Mr. President, this is Robert Hodge. My opinion is it appears
lead champion when you first got elected on this, and it imploded. And then we had to pick the pieces up and put it back together. So to sit here and try to chastise us is disingenuous on your behalf. You had every opportunity to move this process forward and you chose not to. And so to sit here and point fingers at the 11th hour is just, I don't agree with it.
And let me remind you, Commissioner Hodge, there was one vendor we had to work with.
So with that, I'll call a vote on the contract for the animal care and control contract to Cecil County Animal Care and Control contract to adopt it with a 3-year agreement. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries 3-2. Thank you. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.